Hey guys, welcome back to another video. And today I'm going to be going over sort of how I prepare for OCCs or other tournaments, and how I go about thinking about my deck lists, how I go about thinking about my matchups, the meta, stuff like that. And as the case study, we will be using this upcoming July OCC. I'll probably upload this video either right after the event takes place or right before the event takes place, because I'm going to be going over the decks I'm likely bringing, so obviously I don't want to show that too soon. So this will be uploaded either right before, and if it is uploaded right before, you can catch the live stream of the event on Saturday, or it's going to be right after, but either way, this is sort of how I go about preparing. So the first thing I'm going to look at is what's the meta. So if you look at the more broadly, OCC is typically always aggro. Usually you'll have 7 to 8 players bringing 2 to 3 aggro decks. So it's almost always very aggressive. You'll occasionally get more mid-range, but you very rarely get control, and you almost never see double, triple control. And I'm obviously not counting myself in this, because I'm talking about what my opponents are going to bring. And if you look at what's been popular recently, it's just all aggro. It's after the combined arms got nerfed, it's been Brit Italy Air as the #1 deck. Jagro has been making a resurgence. There's Self Damage, which hasn't been as popular on ladder, but it's been very popular in tournament. So these are really the 3 decks I expect to see the most of: Jagro, Air, and Self Damage. However, uh, as I'm sure everyone is aware by this point, they released a new card, Supply Shortage, and this card was not legal for the qualifiers. However, it will be legal for the main event, which means, could this card single-handedly change the meta of the entire tournament? Maybe. Um, and another important part of preparing for a tournament is basic reconnaissance. So looking at what the other people in the tournament are playing, looking at what they're talking about, looking into what they're thinking about. And I have seen Tang Tang, who's going to be in this top 8. He has been playing different supply shortage decks on stream. I know how that section of the Chinese community typically works, is they will bring just the most meta aggro decks, unless they think a new change or a new card is super broken, in which case they will practice it against all of the current decks, and if they think it's good enough, they will bring it to the tournament. So, is it possible that Tang Tang and some of the other Chinese players bring a supply shortage deck? Yes. However, they would be bringing it at the expense of Air, and Air is probably the safest deck you can bet on, just in general in tournaments, over the past year, if not more. So it's usually a safe strategy, almost everyone does this, to just go into a tournament thinking, I'm going to ban Air. I'm almost certainly going to ban Air in every single matchup. So if they do bring a supply shortage deck, it means I'm not going to have to ban Air, and I could just ban the supply shortage deck if I think I have bad matchups into it. Do I think they're going to bring 3 supply shortage decks? Obviously, you could pair this on top of the Britain, whatever ally you want. You could do Soviet Britain, you could do German Britain, US Britain, Japan Britain. All of those are possibilities. Do I think they will bring it? Well, for the past week, I have been, well, not week, but since this card came out, I have been practicing all of those decks. I've been trying them out in different ways. Um, More combo oriented, just general value, um, ramp, fatigue, all sorts of ways. I've been trying all of those decks, and I think the Soviet one could work if played very well and built very well. And just generally speaking, Soviet control is typically one of the least popular decks. Like, least popular decks, even well being good, um, in the entire game. So I really doubt people are going to bring Soviet control. Well, like, a lot of people are going to bring Soviet control. And I think the other options just aren't that good. So I really don't expect more than one supply shortage deck. So then the question becomes, will everyone bringing a supply shortage Britain deck change the other two decks they're going to bring? And the answer to that, I think, is likely no. Because, same thing with air, people don't usually don't try to hard counter air because they know everyone's going to have it at the tournament just because it's such a consistent deck. It's so good against everything that they just go into the tournament thinking, I'm going to ban air every single time. And likewise, you can go into this tournament saying, I'm just going to ban supply shortage, the supply shortage deck, every single time. And therefore, I'm going to bring the exact same two decks I would otherwise. So what I predict is the Tang Tang and most of the other Chinese players, since they often bring decks, like all bring the same decks, I suspect them to bring Britain. I'm not sure what ally. Maybe Britain, Japan. That seems to be the most popular right now. Supply shortage, just Commonwealth control deck. And then Jaggro. I think Jaggro is going to be a staple. I don't think it's going to be cut. I've played a lot of supply shortage. I've played a lot of Jaggro. I think it's still fast enough that you can fairly consistently beat most control decks most of the time. So I don't think Jaggro is going to be taken out of the meta deck. The question is self damage. The problem with self damage is it just gets destroyed by supply shortage. It is probably the worst meta deck prior to the release of supply shortage into the supply shortage critical damage deck. So, do I think people are going to still bring self damage? I kind of doubt it. I've already seen people kind of moving away from it. In the qualifiers, we saw a lot of Jaggro Air German control. So it's possible we'll see this Britain control, German control, and Jaggro. That's sort of what I'm expecting, at least from the Chinese community. Now, who do I play in the first round? It is Kill Switch. And one of the benefits of getting seed 102 in the OCCs is your opponents will qualify through the qualifiers, which means they have to post deck lists a week before the event that they played in the qualifiers. And if you look back at through all of the qualifiers, all of the OCCs, almost nobody drastically changes what they bring because they're going to bring what they think is best to the qualifiers. And I don't think anyone goes into the qualifiers with the mind games of I'm going to bring decks I wouldn't bring to OCC because if you bring decks you wouldn't bring to OCC, you're probably not going to win. So as a result, I get the advantage of knowing what Kill Switch brought to qualifiers. However, supply shortage was not allowed to be run during qualifiers, and I actually prepared with Kill Switch for the qualifiers. I trained with him a fair amount going into this, so I know his decks inside and out. However, we did all of our training before supply shortage was released or even announced. So, it is possible he will switch. However, based on my knowledge of his past tournaments he's played, based on my knowledge of what he plays on ladder, based on just talking to him during our training sessions, I don't think Kill Switch is going to bring control. I think he's going to bring what he's comfortable with, and he's most comfortable on aggro, particularly the combined arms. Maybe I could see him dropping self-damage for Jaguar if he really thinks self-damage is just so terrible into supply shortage, but I expect him to go into this tournament with the idea of I'll ban Britain, whether it's air or supply shortage, and then just play whatever two aggro decks that aren't banned. Which means I'm likely going to be facing something along the lines of this. Meta, Britain, Italy, air. A somewhat off-brand self-damage deck. He's got the two. He's got one Ura, one Parade, one Sendai. He has taken out the Hammer. He used to run Hammer in here. Only two Winter Warfares. So he's got a self-damage deck. There's a lot of room for sort of creativity and slight deck differences when it comes to self-damage. And last but not least, he has his patented combined arms deck. He absolutely loves this. He is incredibly good at it. And it's, even after all of the nerfs, it is still quite a potent deck. However, here is a word of advice. You should never prepare to just beat your opponent in the first round. It very rarely works out because first of all, oftentimes you'll overcommit. So, for example, if you're thinking, well, my opponent in the first round is almost certainly going to bring aggro, I'll bring three of the hardest anti-aggro decks in the world, and then he ends up bringing two control, and you can only ban one of them. Um, and then it's basically just down to can you beat Jagro twice in a row? And the answer is even if you're playing the hardest anti-aggro decks, often no. Um, so hard targeting people often doesn't work out. Maybe somebody brings triple control. Like so, for example, if you're playing against me in the first round, you might think, well, J King often brings control. I'll bring triple ramp. Well, sure, maybe you bring triple ramp and maybe you beat me. And then what are you going to do in the rest of the tournament? Because you will likely lose twice in a row and end fourth and get no prize money. So hard targeting the person usually doesn't work strategically. I also prepared a lot with Kill Switch and helped him get through qualifiers, so it would be pretty rude of me to then turn around and hard target him out of the first round. So now let's start talking about what decks I am bringing. So initially, I went into this tournament thinking I'm just going to bring the three meta aggro decks. I'm kind of sick and tired of playing control and it not working out. I brought triple control the last two events and lost in the first round to triple aggro in the last two events. So really, I was just done. But then the supply shortage came. And I started thinking, this card seems really good. Gorkyu, you might be familiar with him. He's sort of a newer player on the scene. He plays very peculiar decks, but he plays them very well. He has a very new way of looking at the game, very, very creative deck builder. And he has a patented Britain-Japan pin deck. Um, and his design, rather than using pin to remove stuff, is use pin to clog the board. Don't let your opponent play more units. Don't let your opponent deal damage to your HQ because everything is just pinned over and over and over and over. And then eventually you just heal up and win with Commonwealth. Or you play a couple artilleries in the back line and then you just chip their HQ down while pinning their units every single turn. And this is about the deck I practiced. He practiced against me. This was right after the supply shortage change came out, so he only ran two critical damage, and was mostly relying on the bread and butter of the deck, the 4 Susai with the 2 AA Barrage to just return Susai to hand, pin 3 units, and then you toss out like a surprise attack or a naval power, pin the other unit. And we played, I think, 15 games against each other, 16 games against each other, across different matchups. I played Jagro. I went 2-3 with Jagro. I played self-damage, went 0-3 with self-damage. I played air, went 3-0 with air. I played German control and went 2-3. And all of this got me thinking. I was like, this is a very fun deck. It's sort of control in a style I haven't played before. It looks like it's a deck that requires a lot of thinking, and a lot of like abstract and new ways of looking at the game and playing the game. And it just really appealed to me. Maybe it's not the best thing ever. Still can't beat air, but I mean, ban air. It's what you do in tournaments these days. So I started thinking about this deck. And then I built my version of it, which you'll notice a few differences. One, I've now stacked up to 4 supply shortages, 4 critical damage, and dropped down to 2 Susai, 1 AA Barrage, just because I think this is just a much better and efficient way at fully pinning the board. As a result, I've dropped down to 2 delaying tactics, I've added 2 honeys, and I'm testing it out with these 2 blitz bombers just to get the damage, the HQ down to 20 in case your opponent is running a little bit of healing. And this deck, I think, works very well. There's some downsides with it if you compare it to other forms of Britain main supply shortage decks. Those ones often have a lot more units. They're more traditional control style with just these 8 cards, 4 critical, 4 supply. And then they're running the Wrath Lightnings, they're running the Mosquitoes, the Grengards, the Black Watches, all that. And this deck could struggle against that, just because there's less units. However, as a result of running less units, it's faster and runs more healing. So I think it will get Commonwealth off more consistently in mirror matchups. However, I wouldn't want to play this into um, any control deck with a lot of healing. However, bans. And then I thought, okay, I'll bring this and then Jagro, and then maybe Artie, maybe Combined Arms, maybe US Midrange. Um, and then I was talking to Birdo, who I've also been training with. I'm going to train with him more. And he had sent me this list, which is a Soviet Britain list. And he was saying he was having a ton of success with it. He's got the 3 Winter Warfare, the 3 Monsoon Rots, as basically just 3 full clear the boards. ISU for a 4th clearing of the board. And then he just has the regular control early game, tons of guides. And I saw this list, and I saw his stats with this list, and I love Soviet Britain, and I thought I would make a few changes here and there to this list in particular. But I am curious to see if Soviet Britain is actually working right now. And this, again, was obviously before the supply shortage. So when supply shortage came out, I made this deck, which is 3 critical damage, 4 supply shortage. I am only running 3 critical damage just because there is more units in this deck. There is more unit-to-unit combat, and Soviets can struggle a little bit to fight back on board. So I didn't want to just rely on this supply critical. Plus, I wanted more Britain cards. And I have ISU for another board clear. And then supply shortage is a 4 of because it's just absolutely insane. Like, even if you don't run it with critical damage, just on its own, it's really good into aggro. And then I'm running more anti-aggro, 845ths, mobile defense, 3 sickle. I was finding that I could sometimes lose on health, so I threw in Road to Berlin and have been having a lot of success with this. Then I have 1 red banner, which can be combined with my 1 partisans, or the 272nd. And as you can see, not a lot of late game. I think this is a mistake a lot of people are making with control builds right now, is they're throwing in way too much late game when you just don't really need it when you have supply and critical damage. Because if you throw out a ton of late game on the board, your opponent's going to play supply critical and you lose it. Or your opponent, you play supply critical and then you just really only need 1 unit that will be threatening enough that your opponent has to deal with it while all of their units are pinned. And I'm running the Yaks. Well, the Yak and the Wrath. These 2 cards I absolutely love. These 5-cost, higher health planes. They are so frustrating to remove from my opponents. The Yak drawing has been really useful. I've never had issues with draw in this deck, and draw is usually a big issue for Soviet control. I'm running the 2 convoys as well, and I've been having a ton of success with this deck. So I was convinced by this deck, and I was convinced by bringing Britain control. I'm still not sold on this one versus maybe credit denial, maybe a more unit-based one. There's a lot of ways to do it. I don't even need to do it with Japan Ally. I've seen some people do it with Legion, some people do it with Resistance. There's a lot of directions to go with this one, but I like this pin variety from Gorky the most personally. Not necessarily because I think it's the best, but because I think it's the most fun to play. And I think it particularly targets aggro, which I still suspect people are going to bring, as I mentioned previously. So, with those 2 decks, I started thinking, what should be my 3rd deck? Do I want to bring Jagro? And that is a question I think a lot of people ask themselves in tournaments because Jagro is the go-to. I don't know what 3rd deck to bring. I'll bring Jagro. Because there's no Japan main decks since they killed Resistance other than Jagro. So you always have Japan free as a main nation. And it's just a really safe pick. It's ridiculously hard to target in a lineup. And I still may switch to Jagro. I've not submitted these decks yet. They're still open to change. I'm just going over my thought process in how I got here. But I've started really looking at this German-Italy control deck. I brought this deck to the Open, top 16, and I think it got banned, if I recall correctly. So I never actually got to play it. And this is my exact lineup, I believe. Um, Actually, that's not true. I took out the Africa core and put in a Diorado. This is actually an idea I've been playing around with recently. I think the Africa core, if I can find it, I think I already scrolled past it. Here it is. I think people take this card for granted. I think people just assume that you need to run this card in the same way you need to run Leopold. Absolutely not. Um, you don't. And in the same way that I think people are stacking too much late game into their decks, Africa Core is essentially just a form of late game because the German elites are almost all high value late game cards. Like, really, the only elite you would ever pick is Nakshub in a pinch if you play Africa Core on turn 2, or like the Panzer L, the 3/5 Blitz one, just because it's for 5 costs, you can remove something in the front line probably. That's basically it. Africa Core is just a get more value card, and I don't think this deck lacks for value, especially with the addition of King Tiger. Um, you might say like, oh well, you say people run too much late game and you're running King Tiger. I absolutely love this card. Well, that's not true. I hate this card, but I think this card's insane because unlike Tiger IE, which can be removed in a ton of ways, sometimes it's just Carpet Bomb and trade a unit. Um, King Tiger, it gets a lot worse with the supply critical, but as I mentioned previously, I'm probably just going to ban those decks anyways. If King Tiger can hit the board, you just play Mary Nostrum on it and you immediately win, basically. Uh, it's just absolutely insane. So I can afford to run one card slot on a card that will single-handedly win me the game, maybe 20-25% of the time. And otherwise, very anti-aggro. I'm not running Flampanzers because, again, if someone brings air, I'll be banning air. And then Flampanzer, it's good into Jaggro, but it doesn't do a lot into self-damage. Um, doesn't do a lot into US mid-range. I'm running these 9/8/9s also because they're 5 health and blitz. Lets you blitz out 6 healing with a Mare Nostrum. Now, this is something that is sort of unique to me. I've been running these 2 attack in the colonies. I haven't seen anyone else run them. I've been finding these really useful, actually. A lot more so than Tactical Strike, because sometimes you like your board's pinned. Sometimes you don't have a unit that can attack to get the Mare Nostrum healing, and you can just attack in the colonies, heal 3. That heal 3 is often enough the difference. And the other sort of unique part in my deck here is the Martyr. I've been finding this card really useful. Germany often runs out of cards, like card draw, just because they really lack card draw outside of Enigma. And some people just rely on slapping really expensive units, slapping wolf packs and annihilations to try to even the card advantage. Um, I think that's really bad because then you end up in spots where it's turn 1 or 2, you got a bad mulligan in your hand is 2 wolf packs, 2 annihilations. What are you going to do? Whereas Martyr is just a much cheaper way. It takes less card slots, and it's safer into aggro as a way of changing the card difference proactively by you drawing rather than you discarding your opponent. And last but not least, I'm running Lurking Danger, 2 Careless Talks. I've thought really long and hard about swapping them out for Through the Breaches, since these can kill cavalry regiments and bicycle regiments on turn 1. These can kill Fiats on turn 1. However, I think they don't do enough against combined arms. I don't think they do enough against non-Fiat starts from air. I don't think they do enough against self-damage. So I'm feeling better about the Careless Talk, and it lets me run the Lurking Danger for a little extra draw. I still might change that in the future. But there you have it. There's my currently looking at 3 decks. And can my 3 decks beat Kill Switch's 3 decks? Yes, I think so. I think I would be pretty favored if these 3 decks ran into these 3 decks. I suspect he would probably ban Germany, I would ban Air, and then my Britain deck I think would savage self-damage, might be slightly weaker against combined arms, could get high rolled, and then I think my Soviet deck is also going to savage self-damage. I don't think self-damage really has a good shot at winning against either of these decks. I think it needs to beat Germany. Um, And I suspect he's going to ban Germany because it's just the deck he's most familiar with. That's part of the reason with bringing Germany Italy is everyone thinks of Germany Italy as the you're just if someone's bringing a triple control lineup, that's the best control deck, ban it. Um, However, I'm not hard targeting Kill Switch. These decks are all pretty anti-aggro, but that's not because I want to beat Kill Switch in the first round and then see what happens. I just think there's going to be still one or two aggressive decks in everybody's lineup, and I think I'm not hard targeting that necessarily, but I think all three of these decks, well played properly, can give any control deck a run for its money, assuming people aren't bringing like heavy ramp, which I really don't expect. And I think they're good into control. So I think these three decks will be somewhat unexpected. They're not my normal style. I've been running a lot of handlock recently. No discard in any of these. And I'm just excited to play them because they all three play in a different style. Um, the Britain deck and the Soviet deck play in styles I haven't done in a long time, or ever in the case of the Britain one. Um, and I think the success rate with the decks are pretty good. I'm going to do more training with Birdo later this week, test that out a bit more. You might see card changes from these decks going into the actual event. You might see me switch this Britain deck to a different Britain control deck. You might see me drop Germany in favor of Jagro. However, that is how I pick these decks and how I'm thinking about going into the tournament. And I do want to end this video on some gameplay. I mean, this won't be the end of the video. There's going to be a lot of video left, likely, because these are probably going to be some long games. But I'm going to end with a game on each three of the decks, just to give you an idea of how they play, explain my thought process, playing the deck, and then maybe you can try to see that thought process coming out in the actual event on stream. So, first round opponent, Germany. Initial thoughts, probably Germany control. There is not a lot of German aggro decks left. However, I'm unfamiliar with this opponent, and unfamiliar people more often than not are playing aggro, so I'm going to keep the Sudden Strike. I'm only going to keep one Bologna Regiment, I think. That's not true, I'm going to keep both. It's decent against control. Never keep Leopold. Martyr, I'm going second, I don't need the card draw. And often it's something you play, it's rarely something you play on curve. It's usually something you play on turn 8, 9, where you can get two draws out of it at once. So my opponent is actually still mulliganing, which is interesting. I hope he's not AFK. Oh, there he is. So we're just going to pass turn 1. Unless I draw a Careless Talk. Marion Lestrom. So with this hand, if he plays anything, I'll probably Sudden Strike it, and then I'm looking to do Bologna into JU, most likely. Pass again. Maybe he's a countermeasure deck. It's also possible that it's going to be Bologna into move up Sudden Strike, or Marion Lestrom trade if he gets something into the front line. However, this idea sort of gets derailed by the drawing of the 989, because if I do Bologna, this can no longer get the buff, whereas I can play this now as a 5-5, next turn move up the 5-5, play Bologna. Of course, it's possible that this dies to a countermeasure, in which case this Bologna goes to 4k, and then I'm just going to play it next turn anyways. Airstrike, discard, JU. So, could be full discard. More likely, it's just countermeasures. Gonna put this 989 to the front line and see if he has Lion for a Day, because that's Lion for a Day, maybe Hipper would be like the only ways for Germany to respond to this in the front line. There's an alternate play of Arado to draw Bologna, but that's pretty passive, and I would rather keep these not as powerful cards as triggers for potential countermeasures. That is a very good option. So there's a few things I can do. I can Arado first. I have a lot of 4-cost orders in my deck. He doesn't have a countermeasure up. I can also do 989 move up Arado, which I'm feeling the best about. There's also just slamming JU, but that can get punished pretty hard. So I'm going to do 989. Um, I mean, there's nothing for 1k that I would play. Move it up. Just attacks face, so he doesn't have the 5 cost countermeasure. That is interesting. Leaves up 1k. So I could Sudden Strike at this. Um, I'm in no rush to kill the Yegg Bomber. I could try to greed out and do Mare Nostrum hit the Panzer. Do I have to play? So I could trade Sudden Strike this. I'd have 3 credits left over. I could play Bologna first. Healing for 6 with double Mare Nostrum in hand is pretty tempting. Um, I don't think he has. I don't have wonderful options to kill the Yegg Bomber, but I don't think he has wonderful options to get rid of this. So I'm going to do it this way, and then I'm going to draw. I mean, you could say draw last, but I know the countermesh is in my deck, and I know I would rather spend the credits on board than do anything else. We're still unsure whether he's Italy control, Britain hand block, just countermeasures. Okay, so it is Italy control. Um, he goes face. That was a really bad play by him, because if I have Annihilation, he sort of just gets blown out. But unfortunately, I don't. So this is trading here every time. The question is, what do I want to do? I could do JU, like trade JU, hold up Careless. That would be Telegraph since I wouldn't be attacking with the Errata. I could do trade JU, attack with the Errata. He's going to have Decima next turn, so I feel like playing JU now is a bit of a waste. So I'm going to do Bologna Regiment. And the question is, do I want to do second Bologna Regiment? And I'm doing these first because the cost goes up to 4 if I trade. So I could just play this trade. I could trade, go face, hold up from the deep. I think I would rather get a second one on board. And then I actually could go... No. I almost said I could go face, but that'd be a pretty terrible play. Because then you can just kill one of these for free. So I'm expecting an Annihilation here. My hand's pretty resilient to an Annihilation. Panzer H is one of the better things it could hit. So I believe that Annihilation was not off the errata, so I still know this is an order in his hand. Now, there's a lot of questions on what to do. I think I'm saving its decisive defense for Comet, for sure. He's not in Leopold range, so if I just slam JU, I don't have to worry about that. Could get hit by Schwalbe, still could get hit by Decima. I think I would rather just Panzer H. Third Mare Nostrum, second Sudden Strike, or Yegg. This is a pretty easy Yegg. I'm just looking for value in this matchup at this point. I think I'm going to hold up Careless Talk and just go face. So he sees me float 3 credits. So now he has to worry about any number of things. Could be airstrike, could be from the deep. I'm hoping he just plays around it. Top deck second Annihilation. Willing to trigger the decisive defense is probably not a good play by him. And now I'm going to hold up the decisive, because one, I've seen he doesn't really play around it. and two, um, I don't think there's any way other than Comet for him to realistically attack my HQ this turn. I'll also hold up the Careless Talk in case he doesn't want to play around that. And I don't really want to commit units to the board right now, since he has access to double Lie and double Detriment. I'm fine just playing it more reactive, especially since he has discard. The more turns that go back and forth with nobody doing anything, the more turns I catch up on card draw. That is an interesting play. So obviously I can just trade. I can also slam my own Schwalbe for tempo. Um, he does not appear to be afraid of countermeasures whatsoever. Maybe I save this for the King Tiger. This seems like the guy who's definitely running King Tiger. I'm gonna hold it up. Like he's not gonna play in Narado down on an empty board. Okay. Would have preferred he did that in the opposite order. But I know Schwalbe's gone, so I'm just gonna put two threats onto the board. It's possible he actually just kills both of them with Decima Lion for a day. So here is the question. Do I want to just slam Leopold this turn? Do I want to slam Leopold next turn? So is it possible that I rush him? I play Leopold, I drop him to 25, I then have 15 on board. So my other thought is that I could actually just kill the King Tiger if he plays it again. There's the line for a day. Is this the Detrima? The 989. I can actually get one of those. Mare Nostrum on the JU. Could also Hipper. I can always Hipper my own Jagdbomber if he ever commits King Tiger back to the board. I'm going to take this free trade because I don't want to leave him with a unit that could get hit by Mare Nostrum. If he slams King Tiger, these deal 3 each. So if I move up, I can actually steal his King Tiger. If I move up the 989 and hold up Careless Talk. So this deals 1, 3, 3, 3. Does he have the double root out? Dachima. Well, that's very sad. Um, I can Dachima the Panther G. I can also Hipper the 989, which doesn't seem like a terrible play. I'm hoping he doesn't just slam King Tiger here, because that would actually suck. Crap. Um, so he's probably just going to do Mare Nostrum, hit Panther G. He hits this, goes down to 10-7 with Mare Nostrum 11-8. If he's running the JUs, I really need to keep Schwalbe. But if he's not running JU, now is the turn to just slam Schwalbe. I think I need to play Schwalbe. He's running Panther Gs, he's running Airstrikes. If he is running JUs as well, he's very greedy. There's the second Detriment. And trades a 989 into it. That's interesting. So I'm going to get this to the front line, just to slow down this King Tiger a bit. He should be scared to move it to the front line, because I haven't played a line for a day yet. But if he can just hit me with like a wolf pack or something. I mean, this man hasn't really been playing around stuff the entire game, so it's possible he just doesn't play around lion for a day and moves up the King Tiger. Or he just rolls a Leopold, which can't be targeted. um, so if I play 989 up, it just gets shot by Leopold. We know that for sure. Is there a way for me to come back into this game if he never moves up King Tiger? Comet trade into Leopold. He should have played Leopold next to the guard. I still have Comet in deck, so I'm going to just wait, because it would be a massive mistake for him to move up King Tiger. It would put me on a 2-turn clock, but it would be a massive mistake, because I could just theoretically lion for a day. Uh, lion for a day. It's going to double Reich's research. Wolfpack. Shoot HQ. Okay, well now I basically have to do this to slow him down. This has been a very sad game. Hipper. And this is one of the worries with breaking my style of control deck, where it's a much more anti-aggro, is sometimes this happens. Um, but I would highly doubt that this type of deck will be being brought to an OCC. There's the Wolfpack, and there's the Surrender. So that his list is actually similar to Tang Tang's German control list, which, I mean, I've said my thoughts about it before. I think it's pretty terrible. And, I mean, sure, it beats other German control decks, but how does that deck beat Air? How does that deck beat Jaggro? Frankly, the answer is that it doesn't. Um, so I'm not really expecting too much heavy control. Well, I'm not expecting any heavy control, to be honest. But we'll move on to the Britain deck. I'm not going to play these until I win. Uh, just because a deck is great for a tournament does not mean it's great for ladder. Ironically, if I had queued this deck into my last opponent, I think things would have gone much better. Another German player. Default assumption is still that it is a German control deck. Do I keep critical damage? I mean, I'm going second. Could also keep C4th. Definitely not keeping AA Barrage or Sexton. This one's too expensive. This one's too niche. I'm gonna keep a C4th, and the critical damage, just because he kept 3 cards and mulligan quickly, which applies aggro to me. And there it is. And this is quite a good hand against any sort of Heinz. Double critical damage, double supply shortage. This game is probably gonna showcase the strength of this combo. Flak. Now, that is surprising. I'm not too worried about dying yet, so I'm just gonna pin this. And this is something I've learned from Gorky, is it's totally fine just to play pins like this. Just mitigate a small amount of the damage you would otherwise be taking. Autocannon. Now, that is pretty gross. I could just play Crusader to essentially just soak up 3 damage. Um, However, I think I'm just gonna essentially pass this turn and play next turn supply shortage critical damage. Because if I play Crusader and he hits it with the autocannon, which would be the correct play, I've healed 3 at the expense of getting rid of the only card drawn in my hand. Oh, that was a mistake. Should have. Well, no, I wouldn't have had anything to do for 1 credit, anyways. But should have waited to see what I draw. Pioneer. You can still get a little chip damage in with the autocannon. The downside of this combo is it passive effects remain. And I'm just going to play this again. And this time, withdraw. And the reason I'm doing this is just Blitzkrieg here would essentially be lethal. And this kills the autocannon in 1 turn now, because supply shortage does stack. So now I can't get any more chip damage in with that. And I should start drawing into my healing with this Crusader. Doesn't take to kill on the Crusader, which he will soon realize is a pretty big mistake. That is a great draw. Draw 3, heal 4. Essentially just fine pinning this. Maybe the better option would have been Honey, critical damage, get 1 more healing, trades off one of the 1/1s. Well, the 1/1. And let's start healing. I'm gonna play Honey down first. Careless Dog. Okay. Yep. And that's basically what this deck does to aggro. They just never have a chance to attack with any of their units once they hit the ground. And yeah, I think that basically just showcases the strength of the deck. Maybe it's weaker into control than other options, but I think it's much better into aggro than almost any other build of the Britain control. And last but not least, the Soviet Britain control deck. This is the one which is just a blast to play. If anybody knows me, they know that I love playing Soviet control. And what's been really fun about this deck is the number of times I've won on fatigue. Like, this deck doesn't have Commonwealth as a win condition, doesn't have King Tigers and Leopolds of just smashing huge units on the board, massive tempo swings. You just sort of win by, um, okay, I mean, it's Japan, it's going to be aggro. Do I want a mulligan for Sickle? Might be safer to get rid of supply shortage and look for Sickle going second. That's unfortunate. But yeah, this Soviet deck is really just about grinding down your opponent. If he has another 1 health unit, he's gonna, yep. And, like, you don't always have to save supply shortage for huge boards and combos with critical damage. I mean, this is basically just, in this situation, marginally less than a Tora Tora Tora. Or marginally worse than a Tora Tora Tora. Because it doesn't hit HQ. But the upsides is that sometimes it's just a 4 credit fully destroy the opponent's board while slowing them down. I might throw out another. Double hit? Okay. That was quite fortunate. Um, this means he almost certainly has Feigned as the last card in his hand, which sucks. However, I can just do that. So it's also possible it's like a 6 cost Enigma, in which case I think playing it on Nevada was probably a mistake. But hopefully it's an 8 cost Feint. Um, just gonna play a bit around bombing, right? The reason to retreat the Sendai, or the Shiden there, sorry, is that if it is Enigma or Feigned, he's gonna have to do that. Just spend another 5 credits playing it out. And here I have a lot of options. I don't think Shiden's particularly scary in this situation. I think I would like to save the supply shortage for once he plays Feigned, because I'm still expecting the Feigned to come out here. Um, might be too early to play KV. I might want to save KV for after he plays Feigned. In which case, just Armored Train. Guard up a bit more. Soon it's going to start printing these 1/1 infantries, which are going to start healing like crazy. Now, I haven't been playing like under the assumption he has Feigned in hand, because he threw the errata on the empty board. But I feel like playing 8k Feigned there is just better than anything else. Like, I don't care what you have in hand. Okay. I think it's time to just take the kill on the Shiden. Don't let that do anything. If I trade here, it could potentially let him attack face with a Type 94 double surprise attack or a Shiden, or Sendai, sorry. However, this heals me too before he could potentially remove this. And I don't actually... He could have Enigma in hand, so I'm going to play out the 845th. Otherwise, I would actually have just passed because the 1/1 infantry is good enough in terms of getting the healing, playing for value. Because at this point, my hand isn't great with draw, and if he does pull off a massive feint, I'm going to have to be contending with his entire deck. And no, he just doesn't think he can get through. I don't know if he had the Feigned in hand at 8 cost or not. If he did, that would have been a great turn to play it. But he realizes he just can't get through all of that healing, all of that guard. My hand is still huge. And all of that was responsible, or all of that was caused by just the early supply shortage. Or the double early supply shortage, just wiping his board. Um, so that's why I think Jagro could be weak. And I think a lot of people might not get that. Because I don't think a lot of people are looking at the Soviet version of the list. And I think Jagro could still beat other people's Britain versions of the list. Um, and I really thought about bringing in triple supply shortage decks, but I couldn't get a third one to work. It's sort of just so much anti-synergy with Germany. Um, the US main just felt like it wasn't consistent enough. Like I didn't have the otherwise good removal healing guard that the Soviets have. Um, and then the Japan main one, I'm sure you could build a very good like combo oriented deck with a ton of healing, removal, stall, and draw with the intention of getting down to fatigue and winning with last rights. However, I don't think I have enough time to build that deck to perfection or learn to play that deck at perfection. And I think you would need perfection with a deck like that. So that is why I'm looking at this German Italy control to round out the lineup. But anyways, I won't post the deck lists in the description, just because I went over them pretty well in the video. If you really want to use them, you can copy them from there. And I'll probably change these by the time I get into OCC, and I will post the deck lists to OCC in my Discord, which you should all join if you're not already there. Likewise, you should subscribe if you haven't, like, share the video, comment down below what you think of the decks, what do you think of this meta, and thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one, and hopefully I do well in the OCC.